Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Just Work podcast. I'm Kim Scott, co-host, and I'm here with
Wesley Faulkner, the other co-host, here without a guest, but together again to chat about something extremely important, which is leadership.
So one of the things that I would love to do is just sort of do a quick reading about what a leader's role is in preventing bias, prejudice, and bullying. You ready, Wesley? I'll lay it on you. You can tell me
Yes.
where I'm wrong. All right, here we go. How leaders can prevent bias, prejudice, and bullying from disrupting their teams. For me, the chief joy in being a leader is creating an environment where everyone can love their work and working together. That kind of working environment allows a team to achieve astounding results collectively and to be at their best individually. As a leader, you don't have to choose between collective results and each person's individuality. In fact, you can't get one without the other. The strength of the team is the individual, and the strength of the individual is the team. A leader's job. As a leader, it's your responsibility to do what you can to prevent bias, prejudice, and bullying from destroying respect on your team. This may feel like trying to prevent the inevitable given the prevalence of these attitudes and behaviors. That's why it's important that when these problems do occur, despite your best efforts, you respond in a way that makes it less likely that they will happen again. Traditionally, too many leaders acted as though creating a fair and equitable working environment was a distraction from their real job to get shit done. But more and more leaders are beginning to understand that they will have trouble getting shit done unless they first create a reasonable, inclusive working environment. All right. What are you thinking, Wesley?
So I totally agree. I think that old school of just get stuff done, put your head down, and just check off things on the to-do list removes the fact that people are people and
Yeah.
human beings work, and we are not all going to be able to focus when there are other distractions or we feel like what we're saying doesn't have validity, and that kind of shuts you down if you can't participate. And when we are working in a place that is focused on knowledge and knowledge work, being able to share that information is crucial to making sure that everyone has all the information to make the best decisions. So I totally agree with that. But also, if I could,
Yeah.
one thing that we were talking about before we hit the record was a previous role that I had where I had several different direct reports. And one of the lines you wrote is saying that people make it an environment where people can love their work. And I also learned about having the flexibility of allowing people not to love their work as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes people just do it for the paycheck. It's just a job. They want to clock in, do their job, and clock out, and they don't want to be a person that goes all in. They don't want to be a person that's seeking a promotion or to really dive deep into multiple layers to make sure that they really understand what they're working on. And that role taught me to respect it as well. Like, okay, just do the things that you're supposed to do, and then I will just make sure you're on point there. I won't give you extra work. I won't give you stretch projects and all that stuff. So that's one thing that in terms of the reading that kind of stuck out to me of something where it's not universal. Of course, the book is not supposed to cover all the bases, but that's one thing that I would say that if I had to dig in deep for a comment, that's the one I find.
I love that actually, because I totally agree with you. I should have said enjoy their work. Work should not be a source of misery. In fact, but even if you're working, not because it's your great vocation, but in order to put food on the table. There's great nobility in having a job that pays the rent and puts food on the table and allows you maybe to pursue something else that you are passionate about. I think that I had a mentor early in my career who said only about 3% of people have a true vocation, and they confuse the hell out of the rest of us. And I think so. 100% agree. That's a great catch. Thank you. Um, the other thing that I was thinking about as I was reading this is how throughout my life, I always imagined I was creating these, if not environments where people could love their work, at the very least, these BS-free zones. And yet, often I pretended like things were not happening that were in fact happening because I didn't want to deal with them. And sometimes they were happening to me. Even like I always imagined that if I became the boss, that people would quit, uh, hurling bias, prejudice, and bullying my way. And it turns out that's not the case. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know if you had that experience in your role, but so maybe it would be useful to share a story about a time when that happened and why it was important for me to respond differently than I would have if I had not been the leader of the company. What do you think?
Yes.
All right, here it
Share
goes.
away.
Here it goes. So at one point, I had co-founded a software company, and there was a guy on my team who was he was really not doing a good job on this project. It was failing, and I had to talk to him, and I had to talk to him very clearly because the board of directors was actually pushing me to fire this guy. So I wanted to make sure that I was giving him fair and good feedback before that happened. And so I sat down and talked to him. And at the end of the conversation, I asked, as I always wanted to, as I always do, what I could do or stop doing that would help him get this project back on track. And sometimes people think, oh, you shouldn't solicit feedback when you're giving it. But I actually feel like it's really important to do that. I think one of your jobs as a leader is to lay your power down and to make sure that you're getting on the same side of the table with folks and on a level playing field so if I was doing something that was tripping them up, I knew about it. I could stop doing it. And instead of answering me in sort of a thoughtful way, he answered me by just trying to bully me. The problem here is you are the most aggressive woman I ever met. And so now I have this dilemma because on the one hand, I'm trying, not to exert my power. I don't believe that command and control work. I really do believe that you want to solicit feedback and hear what people say. But on the other hand, I didn't feel like the problem was really that I was the most aggressive woman he ever met. Because if I was the most aggressive woman he ever met, I wasn't even on the list of the top 100 most aggressive men he ever met. And we were in an aggressive industry, and his job was to deal with aggressive people. So I felt like his problem was not my aggression. His problem was my gender. And I didn't think that was that was fair game. And so, but because I had, experienced similar things so often, and not as the CEO of the company, but just as an employee, and usually a junior employee, I responded as though I were the person harmed and not the leader. And I just let him get away with it. I chose not to respond. And if I were not the leader, that would be my prerogative to make that choice. But because I was the leader in this case, I had an obligation to point out to him that he was just using my gender to try to bully me, to get me to back off. And the reason was not because of the way he was treating me, but because if he treated me that way, how was he going to treat the women who worked for him or his peers who were women at the company? And that's why I had an obligation to say something. And I made a big mistake as a leader not to say something. At least
How
that's
did
what
you
I think.
not just fire him right then and there?
Well, I don't think firing him then and there would have been the right thing to do either, because then he would have been he would have felt afraid to push back at me next time. But more importantly, he would tell other people, and then everyone would feel afraid to push back. And I really do believe it's important, if you're the leader, to create an environment where people can give you feedback. So I think it was important to create some kind of consequence for him, but not too strong of a consequence. So
Gotcha. You
like,
want it to feel like retaliation.
yeah, yeah. So like in retrospect, what I wish I had said, which is not what I did. I did nothing. But what I wish I had done is to say, look, yeah, kind of what I just told you and what I was thinking in my head. Look, I don't think, your problem is not my aggression. Your problem is my gender. You said aggressive woman, not aggressive person. And my gender is not changing. And the reason I'm saying this to you is not because I'm not listening to your feedback, but because I don't want you talking to other women at the company in that way. Something like that, something along those. I don't know. What do you think? What should I have said?
Well, I'm just curious about the word aggressive. Like, what is the definition do you think that he meant by that? Were you straightforward when you asked questions? Were you demanding results? Which part would be defined as aggressive? I
Yeah.
would say that, and also an aggressive way out of context, like saying that someone, if someone's your higher up in the company, they kind of tell you what you need to do, and so that's kind of the role. So, what was the aggression outside of the norms, I guess, for that position?
Yeah. So that would have been a great question to ask him. I don't think, uh, and I don't know. I didn't ask him the question. My sense was that he, I don't, I mean, the feedback I got from most people was that I wasn't being aggressive enough. So, uh, and that like anytime the word aggression is being used around to a woman, I found it's worth asking the question that you just asked, Wesley, because it's like people expect me at some level because of bias. They expect me to be, kinder, gentler leader, and uh, and they often, what happens is people will say, and this is more biased than bullying, but people will say you're not likable. And I had gotten that feedback earlier in my career. You're not likable because I was behaving in ways that were similar but actually gentler than my colleagues, my peers who are men, but they didn't expect me to be anything like as aggressive as the men. Or it's a little bit like the negotiation bias, right? People will accuse women of being not as good negotiators, and it's not. I find anyway, it's not that women are not as good negotiators. The problem is that women get punished when they negotiate, and so they don't negotiate as hard because they're rational actors. Same thing with aggression. So I mean, I don't really know because I didn't ask the questions that I should have asked at the time.
Yeah, I think what was said there was extremely emotional, but didn't really quantify the harm. So if he would say why the aggression was an issue, like does he not have a word of edgewise? Does he not feel listened to?
Mm-hmm.
The response was very like I was I was talking to someone earlier today, and they were having issues with their partner.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people send me message because I'm out as a person who's neurodivergent, and so when they have issues, they're like, "You'll understand, so I'll talk to you." And they were having an issue with their partner about it because it's something from the like a LinkedIn post got a response that felt very triggering to them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I sent him as a resource for him to read and to kind of to help get the vocabulary and the words to have conversations that are difficult was a book about nonviolent communication.
Yes.
And with nonviolent communication, it's less about identifying the fault in the other person specifically, but saying the emotion or the thing that is bothering you about it. So it's a very like when you're speaking, it's a statement of saying this is how I feel and this is the how it affects me, and then following up with this is what I would like to change.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about what he said didn't have the component of what it doesn't have the self reflection of understanding his role and how it affected him and being able to express it in a way that he can understand the way that he participates in the relationship.
Yeah.
So
And I
Yeah, go ahead.
think, sorry to interrupt, but I think the reason that it didn't have that component was that he didn't actually, and again, maybe this is, I could be wrong about this, but my perception is that he didn't actually feel like the problem was that I was too aggressive, but he
Mm-hmm.
was using my gender as a way to try to get me to stop giving him this critical feedback about the project.
Mm-hmm.
That was so it wasn't, and this is the problem with bullying, is that bullying often presents itself as though it's making this sort of logical case, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not actually making a logical case. It's just it's just trying to dominate the situation, and often using some sort of um, pejorative pejorative language to push you, to get you to do something, or to manipulate the situation in some
Mm-hmm.
way. I think. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, yes, I agree. Minor spoiler. So I went with my family. We saw the Barbie movie.
Huh?
And have you seen it by
I
chance?
haven't. I
Have
have
not.
tried to get them to go every day for the last few days, but somehow we haven't managed to get there.
Well, there's a bully in it. I'll just call it that, to try
Okay.
to like minimize it. And the theme song that they play is "I Want to Push You Around."
Yeah. Yes.
It says, and it does feel that way. Of it's just a domination. It's a
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
It is a power play, to kind of like wrestle that type of like you said, you can't change your gender. You're not going to change your
Yeah.
gender,
I mean,
and
I
it's
could
the thing
change it,
that
but I'm not gonna.
yes,
Yes.
yes, but it's a thing where they take a position where you have no defense, right?
Yeah.
And that's why he was kind of, I feel he was bringing up. But what my big curiosity is that you said you didn't fire him. So what happened after this? Did they stay? Did you end up removing him further down the line? Did he end up performing? What was the actual relationship after this interaction?
He did not improve his performance. The project failed, and then he did get fired for failure to perform. But in the meantime, between the time that it became clear that he wasn't able to do his actual job and get fired because this project was which was like the core of his job, he I had an opportunity to see what he would do to other women in the company. Unfortunately, so what happened was, we had a company all hands, and we had pizza, and this young woman who worked for him came up with a plate with a couple of eaten crusts, just crusts of pizza on it, and she needed to throw it away, and he was sitting on a table, and the garbage can was underneath the table, and she said, I need to. It was clear she needed to get to the garbage can, and he finished her sentence for her, and he said, get in between my legs. And that's the problem, like, right, that's, yeah, it was, is that if you don't nip it in the bud, if you don't nip bullying in the bud, especially if you're the person who has some authority in the situation, then it escalates. It just keeps getting worse. And yeah, so there you go. that
Okay.
that is
It's,
why that is why I should have said something, because hopefully if I had said something earlier, then he would have he would not have done that to her, maybe.
or two other questions if I can. Sorry, it's turning the mic around towards you, but
That's all right.
when, were there any warning signs before that talk where he said you were aggressive? Number one, and number two, what would you have done differently towards the beginning, like even interviewing or any previous interaction to kind of tease this out earlier?
There probably were warning signs, but I wasn't looking for them, so I don't recall that. I don't recall sort of. I mean, when he said this to me, I was really shocked. So that was the first time it rose to the level of consciousness. I think that one of the things that I could have done was to when I was interviewing him, and when I was checking references, more to the point, I could have asked him to give me some references, or I could have found some backdoor references from people who had worked for him, and in particular, women who had worked for him or people from historically marginalized groups who had worked for him. Because I think you often are gonna get that's where that's where you're first gonna see bullying. I mean, another thing that I often did when I hired people, but I didn't do it with him for some reason, is I'll go out to dinner with them and I'll notice how they treat the waiter or the whoever's waiting the table. And that will often give you a sense of how a person treats uh, people with less power than they have, because a person who is inclined to bully is much more inclined. They rarely pick on someone who they perceive to be more powerful than they are.
And it's interesting you mentioned that he wasn't necessarily a high performer and he had these issues. He was also a person that wasn't performing and he has these issues. Do you, by any chance, just trying to move into a place of compassion, do you think that basically he was using the way that he treated other people as a, grabbing power where he can because he felt inadequate at his job and the role that he did?
Almost certainly that was the case. I mean, that is often the case when someone is bullying others. So like another thing I could have said to him, uh, when he said, "You're the most aggressive woman," I could have said, "What is going on here? Like, I don't think I'm that aggressive. Like, what's really the issue here? What's really going on here for you?" And he might have said, "I'm struggling in this job," or he might not have, but I could have opened the door for him to share with me what was going on for him.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek. And
Uh-huh.
when, especially the Next Generation, and when Captain Picard had a dilemma or an issue, he would bring in the cabinet or the leadership, and it would be the engineering, someone from engineering, someone from
Mm-hmm.
security, and his number one or his second in command. It would have a doctor and also a counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wish that there were internal counseling resources that you could just
Yes.
say, talk to Deanna Troy because you have
Yeah.
some issues going on.
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
only if, because it's hard to, because we're not necessarily people in the company in a position where we can do professional counseling and have that ability, and at the same time have that professional distance, to go that level deep to actually get to some core issues. And I thoroughly do believe as well, though, and I think your book touches on this, that when you are a leader in a company, when you are in leadership, when you're framing how a company treats its employees, every employee should feel like they are better leaving than they did coming into the company,
Yes.
because of the way that they're either being treated or how they are taught how to work with other people. And I know if I was ever the head of a company, that something would be part of my mission, saying that we will ruin you for other companies because we will do things in the way that they should be done.
Yeah.
But it also is really hard. There's a lot of moving pieces. And like I said, that you kind of also need to like have that such an intimate relationship to get to the base of the point,
Yeah.
to have people not only feel that comfortable but be comfortable with themselves to be able to express that.
I think that is extremely well said, and it's interesting. In the military, they do have something sort of similar. The non-commissioned officer is someone who has had the job, who's riding along beside the leader, whose job it is to give this leader advice and speak truth to power, and so they're not exactly a counselor, but there's something akin to a counselor, which I think would be amazing if we had that in corporate America. I think another thing about this story that I would love to explore for a second with you, Wesley, before we wrap up, is I think, like, as a white woman leader, it's complicated because on the one hand, I am as a white person, I'm sort of historically advantaged. And as a woman, I'm sort of historically disadvantaged. And so that's complicated because when I'm laying my power down, it's really important that I do that. Every leader should do that. But also, as a person who's historically disadvantaged, I need a little bit of that authority as well. And so, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or navigating that.
Oh, 100%. It's so hard, and it changes from person to person.
Yeah.
I remember a previous job that I had. I was in marketing. I was senior in marketing, and I had someone junior working with me. And so I was a black man, and she was a white woman. And
Mm-hmm.
so, because of the power differential, I was like, well, let me be extremely transparent about how much I make and what I'm being told, and I confided in her just so she could feel and know if she's getting paid fairly and understanding the work distribution. And then she took all that information and then just kept it private. Like, she would then talk to other
Wow.
leadership and have information, but wouldn't share it back to me. So she just accumulated power rather than
Yeah.
distributed or fairly. And so that was one where I was like, oh man, I put myself in a
Yeah.
position where I myself am vulnerable because um, which I mean, I agree that you need to demonstrate, especially if you're a place of power, demonstrate how you want to be treated. But there's a person that I bring up often, Brene Brown, talking about
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability and about how you should understand that dial about how
Yeah.
vulnerable you should be with the person that you're working with. And that is, I think, something I still have not found the right like tune to
Yeah.
like move that knob.
Yeah.
I default to being more vulnerable than probably I should. I'm an open book, and I just let the chips fall where they may. Meaning that I'm going to get hurt. I'll just take that on, but I
Yeah.
don't want to feel like I need to worry about being on guard all the time.
Yeah, I think Brene Brown talks very wisely about it. And you don't want to offer your vulnerability to someone who's bullying you. And that was that's a perfect example of what I was sort of
Absolutely.
wrestling with in the moment. Even though
Mm-hmm.
I felt like he couldn't bully me because I was his boss, but of course he could. You know, that was the problem. All
Yeah,
right.
that's like a response mechanism. Like, this
Yeah.
is a defense mechanism of like, this is how I keep myself safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sort of, I needed to realize that it was my job to respond as a leader, not as the person harmed in that moment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, as always, great chatting with you. I learned a lot. And where can folks reach out to us if they've got stories or want to join us for the podcast?
Well, we have emails. So we have hello@justworktogether.com. So email us, and we will love to feature your story and hear more about you and get you on the podcast if you want to share that with us in person and expose our readers to your experience, good, positive, as the perpetrator or the person who is experiencing bias, prejudice, or bullying in the workplace.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.